There are moments in life when we stand in front of a mirror and feel an uncomfortable truth pressing down on us. The reflection we see is not just a body, not just a face. It is the sum of our habits, our choices, our excuses, and our fears. And deep inside, we begin to realize something that is both liberating and terrifying. The greatest obstacle we face is not outside of us, but within. It is not society, not bad luck, not the unfairness of life, but the voice that whispers in our head, the chains we wrap around ourselves, the limits we accept without a fight. The biggest enemy is not the world, it is ourselves. The Stoic philosophers knew this well. They lived in a world full of chaos, corruption, and injustice, yet they kept reminding themselves that the true battlefield was the mind. Epictetus, once a slave, said it with piercing clarity, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Marcus Aurelius, emperor of Rome, with all the external enemies of empire at his gates, still wrote in his private journals that his greatest task was to conquer anger, desire, and despair. Seneca, one of the richest men of his time, warned that the deadliest poisons were not in cups of wine, but in the unchecked passions of the human soul. And so, if we dare to look honestly, we will see that most of the chains that bind us are forged by our own hands. Fear of failure keeps us from trying. Fear of rejection keeps us from speaking. Laziness convinces us that tomorrow is always better than today. Pride blinds us to our mistakes. These are not external enemies storming the gates of our lives. These are internal saboteurs whispering from within, and they are far more dangerous because they wear the disguise of our own thoughts. Imagine a man standing before a locked door, convinced that a great treasure lies behind it. He pushes, he strains, he curses fate for giving him such a barrier. Days turn to weeks, weeks into years. He dies believing life cheated him. But if only he had looked closely, he would have seen that the key had been in his pocket all along. This is how most of us live. We believe the limits are outside, when in fact the true prison is self-created. One of the deepest illusions is to think that life's unfairness is what holds us back. Certainly, life is not equal. Some are born into wealth, others into poverty. Some are gifted with talent, others must struggle for every inch. But the Stoics remind us that while circumstances shape the stage, they do not determine how we act upon it. Epictetus was born into slavery, beaten and humiliated, yet he rose to become one of the most respected teachers of philosophy in history. His master could break his body, but not his spirit. Why? Because he understood that the greatest enemy was not the master outside, but despair within. Think about your own life. How many opportunities have slipped away because you told yourself, "I am not ready," or "What if I fail?" How many times have you silenced your voice because you assumed others would laugh, or dismissed your dreams because the mountain looked too high? The world did not stop you. You stopped yourself. The chains were invisible, but no less heavy. Let us examine the nature of these inner enemies more closely. The first is fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of change, fear of pain. Fear whispers that it is safer to remain where you are, even if where you are is unsatisfying. But fear is rarely an accurate guide. It is a shadow, often larger than the reality it hides. The Stoics advised us to practice premeditatio malorum, to imagine the worst-case scenario in detail, and by doing so, rob it of its power. Seneca would remind himself, "If exile comes, I will survive. If wealth is lost, I will still have the essentials of life. If death arrives, It comes for all, and is not an evil but a natural event. Fear collapses when faced directly. The second inner enemy is desire. We convince ourselves that happiness lies in the next achievement, the next possession, the next recognition. And so we run endlessly, chasing mirages that recede with every step. Desire enslaves us because it makes us believe we are incomplete without something outside of ourselves. But Epictetus taught, freedom is secured not by the fulfillment of men's desires, but by the removal of desire. When we no longer need more, when we master the hunger that drives us, we discover a freedom wealth can never buy. The third enemy is pride. Pride blinds us to correction, deafens us to wisdom, and convinces us that we already know enough. Pride resists growth because it sees growth as an admission of weakness. Marcus Aurelius struggled against this constantly, reminding himself that emperors too could be wrong. That power was no shield against error. He wrote, "If someone can prove me wrong and show me my mistake in any thought or action, I shall gladly change. For I seek the truth, by which no one was ever truly harmed." To break inner limits, we must be humble enough to see them and brave enough to confront them. The fourth enemy is laziness. Not merely the absence of effort, but the habit of postponing life itself. How many dreams die not because they were impossible, but because they were never begun? We say, "Tomorrow I will start. Tomorrow I will change. Tomorrow I will live." But tomorrow is a lie the enemy within tells us to avoid the discomfort of today. The Stoics were ruthless with time. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." To conquer laziness, we must live with the urgency of mortality. Each day is a gift. To postpone it is to betray ourselves. All of these enemies, fear, desire, pride, laziness, live within us. And yet, they are not invincible. The Stoics did not simply point out these chains, they handed us the tools to break them. Discipline, self-reflection, humility, courage, these are the weapons we must wield. But the fight is not won once. It is fought daily, in small choices, in unseen moments. It is fought when you rise from bed instead of hitting the snooze button, when you bite your tongue instead of exploding in anger, when you say no to the temptation that will harm you tomorrow, when you choose silence over gossip, wisdom over impulse, virtue over comfort. Each small victory weakens the enemy within. Each day of practice makes the chains lighter. But here is where the struggle deepens. Breaking inner limits requires honesty, brutal honesty. To admit that the problem is not out there, but in here, requires courage greater than facing an external enemy. It is far easier to blame fate, society, or other people than to face the mirror. Yet this is the path of the Stoic warrior. He does not waste his life fighting battles he cannot win, nor chasing illusions he cannot hold. He fights himself, and in conquering himself, he becomes unconquerable. There comes a moment in every life when we are tested. Perhaps it is a failure so public it shatters our pride. Perhaps it is a loss so deep it strips away all illusions. In those moments, the inner enemies rise up to whisper, "Give up. You are weak. You cannot continue." And yet, if we remember the wisdom of those before us, we will see that this is the very battlefield where growth is possible. Marcus Aurelius faced war, betrayal, and plague. Epictetus faced slavery. Seneca faced exile and death. None of them escaped hardship, but all of them conquered themselves in the midst of it. The truth is this: Life will always place limits before us. Some will be external, yes, but the greater limits are internal. If you believe you cannot, you will not. If you convince yourself you are broken, you will act broken. If you insist that tomorrow will be better without action today, tomorrow will never arrive. The biggest enemy is yourself. But so too, the greatest ally you can ever find is also yourself. So how do we break these inner limits? First, by awareness. You cannot defeat what you cannot see. Write down the excuses you tell yourself, the fears that stop you, the desires that enslave you. Shine light upon them, and they lose power. Second, by discipline. Create small habits that weaken the enemy. Rise at the same hour. Practice gratitude. Speak less, listen more. Train your body, sharpen your mind. Third, by reflection. Ask yourself daily, did I live according to my values today? Where did I fail? Where can I improve tomorrow? And finally, by humility. Accept that this is not a war you win once, but a lifelong struggle. Pride whispers that we are finished products. Wisdom reminds us we are always in the making. At the end of the day, the world is not truly against you. Circumstances change, people disappoint, fortune rises and falls. But the decisive factor will always be how you govern yourself. You are both the prisoner and the key, both the obstacle and the path, both the enemy and the ally. And so I leave you with this question. When you look in the mirror tonight, will you see a person defeated by fear, pride, and laziness? Or will you see a warrior who dares, each day, to confront and overcome the enemy within? If this reflection speaks to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to this channel, Stoic Lessons for Life, and continue the journey of mastering not the world, but yourself. For in breaking inner limits, we discover the only freedom that matters, the freedom to live fully, wisely, and without regret.